Well, welcome. Tonight we're starting a new show. We've had the conservative view, the liberal view, and all along we've been hearing about these libertarians. Nobody seems to know who they are, what they are, so we decided tonight let's have a show on the libertarian view. So why don't we start with introductions?
I'm Arthur Sgalia. I live in Douglas, work in Hopedale, and I guess I qualify as a libertarian.
I'm Michael Soares. I live here in Milford, and I'm part of the Milford Town Republican Committee.
Okay, now I'm confused. We searched high and long to find libertarians.
Sure. I mean, I don't think I'm that unusual. You look at the Pauls, Ron Paul and Rand Paul, and they're both Republicans with strong libertarian leanings. I feel like I fall in that category where I agree mostly with libertarian principles, but I believe in the Republican Party.
Okay. Arthur, what's a libertarian?
I think a libertarian is someone who invests their greatest faith in the human individual and their ability to make their best decisions for themselves, their families, and for whatever group they may be a part of, to collectively make those decisions as individual human beings.
Okay. I can understand what a Republican is, because they don't want me. I can understand what a Democrat is, because they don't accept me. I mean, all along, I've been told I'm too fiscally conservative. When we do the liberal view, the blue people say, no, you're too fiscally conservative to be one of us, okay? We'll go look to the red people. No, you don't answer the litmus questions the right way. So you're socially unacceptable. You're too socially aware. So somewhere I fall in the middle. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, explain to me, Lucy, what this libertarian thing is.
You might be a libertarian, and maybe you just don't know it.
Is that what it is?
It may be. Libertarians believe in minimizing government, not getting rid of government altogether like anarchists, which is often confused with libertarian. But they believe in being fiscally conservative with taxpayer dollars. They believe in being socially accepting. They believe in the Constitution, the First Amendment, Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth, all of them. And they really, truly value all of that. And they believe in private contracts versus government mandates. They think that that's, that, like Arthur was saying, free people able to contract freely without government intervention should be the number one priority.
So now we've got libertarian candidates running for president. I'll get in trouble because I still don't understand why it isn't flipped. But what are they running on? I mean, we know Bill Weld, and that's why I say to me he should be the head of the ticket.
Well, Bill Weld, I think, was more of a line Republican up until the time he was invited to join the ticket. Gary Johnson, I think, though, while he ran for governor as a Republican, I believe he sort of assumed the libertarian mantle much earlier. In fact, I think he ran in the last election as a libertarian candidate. So I think he really has been the standard bearer. And I think they chose Bill Weld. I wasn't in on the decision. I think they chose Bill Weld as someone whose principles aligned well with the Libertarian Party to create a ticket that had perhaps a higher than average national profile.
Isn't that what got him in trouble when he ran for office or thought of running for office? As soon as he left the East Coast, the Square State people just would not accept his social...
Yeah, he was absolutely too too liberal for most conservatives, and that's some of the problems you run into. We have a national Republican platform, and then we have more local party principles, and sometimes they can conflict with each other, and that's okay, I guess. But with Weld, I think he kind of felt like you, where he wasn't didn't feel accepted by the Republican Party because he was too socially liberal. And that's when he sought out the Libertarians, and I believe he joined the party in 2009.
As I had mentioned before, I have a hard time in Massachusetts or the East Coast figuring out what the difference is between a conservative Democrat and a liberal Republican. Is that more or less where the Libertarians kind of slide in?
I tend to think of it more as a two-dimensional diagram where you have progressive liberals, conservatives, statist, socialist, authoritarian, individualism, anarchist. And I think that you can fall anywhere on that diagram. You can be a socialist Democrat like Bernie Sanders. You can be a Republican or conservative libertarian like Gary Johnson. I can't think of an example offhand of a liberal libertarian, but that is a position one can hold.
Well, I would say that Bernie Sanders, he has strong civil libertarian views, and that's one of the things Gary Johnson was trying to point out, that when it comes to social issues, they're very much in line with each other. When it came to economics, that's when they went their own separate ways.
So is a libertarian more blue or more red?
They're purple.
They're purple.
Or yellow, depending on what color you want to use.
Yellow?
Yellow is the yellow gold is the official color of the Libertarian Party.
Yellow?
Yellow, and the porcupine is their official.
Come on.
The elephant for Republicans, the
donkey
for Democrats.
And you got a porcupine?
A porcupine because he leaves everyone alone, but he can defend himself.
I have to explain something. Only when I had to register to vote did I become a libertarian with a capital L. I've been a libertarian with a small l. I wasn't privy to nor particularly interested in party animals, colors, and so forth. The very idea of becoming a libertarian party member is a little bit of an oxymoron, to become collectively a libertarian.
Now, do you get to vote in primaries if you're a libertarian?
Yeah, but no one's on the ballot.
Oh, okay, so you get the same problem. You've got to vote in the yellow or whatever funny colored ballot. Because when I came here, I realized that if I'm not unenrolled, which really annoys me with that title, that I may not be able to vote in a primary that I care about.
Well, you can always, when on your way into the voting booth or the polling place, you're offered the opportunity to change your affiliation, which is how so many Democrats have sabotaged Republican elections. Republicans have sabotaged Democratic elections.
Oh, I thought you had to be registered. That's my ignorance.
You have to be registered, but you don't have to be registered and affiliated.
Oh.
But on the way in, you can say, I want to change my affiliation from what I always was independent, to a Republican.
Yeah, but you can't be independent because there's an independent party.
Well, and that's the thing. In Massachusetts, there are 4 recognized parties. Libertarian isn't one of them. They're a party designation, which is basically the same as unenrolled.
There's 4, and libertarian doesn't count.
Correct.
Donkeys, little elephants.
The Green Rainbow Party and the United Independent Party.
United Independent Party.
Because of Evan Felchuk and his run in 2014,
Oh,
he
okay.
gained enough support under his party platform to become an official party. Now, he has to maintain that party status, and he may lose it because no one has since run on the ticket, or there aren't enough people registered under that party to maintain that. So they have so long to make their quotas.
Yeah, but now with what's going on between the Democrats and the Republicans, because I can't understand this election. It's the first time that I'm going into a voting booth holding my nose on either one. You start thinking about it, won't the Libertarians pick up enough to become a recognized party?
They may, Massachusetts, it goes by state. So I know in central Massachusetts, the Libertarian candidate is strong. In fact, I see more Gary Johnson signs than I do Hillary signs. So I know that there's a strong libertarian base in central Massachusetts. Whether it's enough to make it an official party, I'm not sure. We'll see.
Where do you think, if you took the Gary Johnson, Bill Weld group out, who gets most of their votes?
I mean, I would like to think that that's, you take my candidate away, I'm not going to pick the lesser of two evils. I'm going to leave that part of the ballot
Are
blank.
you not going to vote?
No, I'll vote. I'll still vote. There's plenty of down ticket
Well, no, but I'm just saying,
items to vote for.
if you couldn't vote for Gary Johnson,
I'd probably write in somebody.
oh, write in.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't give one of the two major party candidates my vote. Absolutely not.
I'll vote for neither of those people. Will not.
And see, I have a tough time because voting for neither means I don't know how to vote at this point. I really don't. You know, a year ago we sat here and I said my biggest nightmare is a year from now I'm going to walk into the voting booth and have a choice between a liar and a buffoon.
And that's the choice you have today.
And here's my nightmare. I jinxed myself. You know, my son-in-law, of course, screams, no, you have a viable third
Yeah.
option.
You have a third and a fourth option. You have the potential for Jill Stein as the Green Party candidate, but
Who?
yeah, exactly. The three.
I'm sorry,
The
I mean,
three
yeah.
top contenders would be the Democrat, the Republican, and the Libertarian. The Libertarian is by far the largest third party in the nation.
So now we saw Rand Paul jump out. And I laughed because I said, this man may save the Republican Party from itself. But then he got nowhere. Why?
I think Trump just sucked out all the air from the room. All the logic and debating about policy just went out the window once Trump came on the stage. As soon as the debates came on there and he was front and center and him and Jeb were just going at it personally, there was no room for policy debate. So
Well,
he was.
I don't know anybody who could argue against Trump's policies.
I don't know if you can argue for or against him.
Does he have any?
I don't know.
I mean, the problem with
Does Hillary?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Oh, I don't
have you
think,
heard them debate about it though?
No, but I don't think there's any doubt. Hillary, in my mind, is just 4 more years. We already know what's happening.
if I had to vote based on policy, I guess I'd probably, by a slight margin, vote for Trump. But my problem with Trump is not his policies. My problem with Trump is his psyche. He's a dangerous man. He will not allow himself to lose the slightest conflict. If he gets into a crying match with a baby, he has to win. That's dangerous. That man is dangerous. He shouldn't have his finger on that button. I've always said, tongue-in-cheek, that I'd like to know
Is that the nuclear power plant
That's the
button?
big red one.
No, I was just say, when they said the nuclear triad, is that the button that turns on the nuclear energy? Oh, God.
I've often said in tongue-in-cheek that I hope the Marine who carries the football around is carrying a pistol that's loaded. I mean, that man is dangerous. Hillary's dangerous for other reasons.
Yeah, but what I keep hearing people come back to me with is, with Hillary, you know what you're going to get. You don't know with Trump.
Well, do you really know what you're going to get? I mean, Hillary just came out, like some WikiLeaks emails came out that she has a public stand on issues and then she has a private stand on issues. So do you really know where her policies really truly lie?
I feel comfortable knowing that if she wins, we'll have 4 more years of a dismal economy, no growth, regulations crushing businesses like mine, and Bill Clinton will feather his nest.
But do we?
There's more than that, though.
But does she lead us to the breaking point is my problem.
You will have a Supreme Court, which is dangerously liberal, bordering on socialist,
Yeah, it's an interesting,
for longer than I'll be alive.
interesting question. Right now, Obama put through as middle of the road as he could stomach. Is that a nice way of saying it?
Yeah, okay.
His nominee is not a far left.
Right.
It's not a far right, obviously. But you think she'd pull it back and replace it?
I
with
have no
somebody-
idea why the Republicans don't take him.
Well, I guess the question is that it all depends on this election, whether or not the Republicans still hold the Senate. If the Republicans still hold the Senate, then she would probably push forward this nominee to try to get those because you need a majority of
Is
the
there
Senate.
enough time after the election to accept the nominee before she gets in?
That's another
Probably.
possibility, unless
I'm
Obama,
because
unless
Obama
Obama
would withdraw
withdraws
him, yeah.
the name.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Because realistically, I don't think you can get anybody as central as this nominee.
I agree.
If Hillary comes in and, especially if the Democrat.
We're going to get Bill Clinton. We're going to get a Barack Obama, who's never practiced law a day in his life, as her nominees.
That'd be scary.
Yeah, but could they get through? I mean, seriously.
Again, if it
I
all
think it has-
depends on who controls the Senate.
It has more to do with the speed than the end result. Most presidents, Robert Bork aside, most presidents get the nominee they want,
Right.
as long as they've vetted them for skeletons in their closet.
Sure.
It's just a matter of how long it takes.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think what the Republicans are doing is terrible. They're as bad as the damn Democrats. The damn Republicans now are as bad as the damn Democrats before, because they're both doing the same thing. They held up the Supreme Court for political reasons.
I think the problem with politics today in this country is that we've developed far too many litmus tests.
Yes.
Everybody's got a litmus test. Everybody runs in reverse a single issue choice.
Well, part of the problem is our primary system to begin with, where you essentially went during the primaries, you got to be the most polarizing person of your party to get the nomination, and then you have to somehow slowly back up to the middle of the spectrum to try to win some over those.
Well, the one thing,
independents.
Mike, you got to give Trump credit. Brilliant at becoming the presidential nominee with no money. He's essentially spent no money.
Just say outrageous things, and you get the media attention, your name recognition, and people vote for you.
It just totally stuns
I mean,
me.
the whole debate process this election cycle has been absurd. You can't put 12 people on a stage and have them debate. I mean, I was on the debate team in high school. A real debate, there hasn't been a real debate, I think, since Kennedy-Nixon. It's all been a dog and pony show where people yell at each other. I mean, that is absolutely unacceptable. You get a time to present your opinion. You get the opposite opinion. You get time to interrogate each other. You get time to make a final statement. And as I recall, I was very young, that's how Kennedy-Nixon took place. And that's how these debates should take place. The problem with the Republicans was they diluted any support for a rational candidate among a whole lot of people. For my money, anybody on that stage would have been a better nominee.
There
than
were some
Trump.
really solid people.
Well, I think it's good to point out that Trump never made more than 40% of the Republican Party votes. He was always the largest, he got the plurality of the votes. He never got the majority. So I think the fact that we were 17 candidates when we should have been 10, we were 10 candidates when we should have been 3, really helped propel Trump to the nomination, whereas if it was a much smaller group, they would have united faster. Like an anti-Trump would have risen much quicker.
Well, when I think of people like a Rand Paul, he made me feel comfortable. Even Gary Johnson, I heard today on Fox News, which is not your most liberal view of the world, saying that he has the trustworthiness of Uncle Bernie. When it comes down to people looking at him, they may not agree with him, but they believe in him.
Sure.
They believe that the guy's sincere and he's straight. What do you think of that?
I think it's absolutely true. I mean, when he had his tragic Aleppo moment, he just came out, what is Aleppo? I don't know, tell me, because, another candidate might have tried to talk the question and delay it or talk about something else, but he was just honest about it.
No, I was more impressed afterwards when he just said, I blew it.
Yeah.
I just had a moment. I absolutely blew it.
That's something you'd never hear Trump say about
What
that.
Gary Johnson doesn't get is rule number one in today's politics is if you don't like the question you were asked,
Deflect?
answer the question you wish you were asked.
Yeah.
And that comes with being a trained politician, which he
Come on,
should
he's
be.
a governor.
He's been a governor, of a fairly small state, but still, you would think he would be more rehearsed.
If we have a local candidate for selectman and he or she stumbles, okay. Our selectmen get paid all of $8,000 a year, probably not a full-time gig. I can buy it. But he's one of 50 people in this country who really have massive, massive influence. He's a governor.
Sure.
So, from that end, I don't buy it that he shouldn't be more prepared.
No question he should have been more prepared. I went back and looked at the news. I Googled Aleppo and I Googled Damascus backward for the week before. And in all honesty, Damascus was much more the center of discussion than Aleppo was in the news. The New York Times said, silly Gary Johnson, he didn't know that Aleppo is the capital of Syria.
Excuse me? Am I missing
They got
something?
away with that.
Oh, I was going to say, when I flew to the capital of Syria, I didn't land in Aleppo.
Well, they got away with it. They do the same thing to Jill Stein. What did Jill Stein say the other day? It was the first time her name was mentioned in the news because it was a faux pas. So we could talk for hours about the lack of objectivity in the media.
But Arthur, one of the things I've always had a problem with is I ask a question of my liberal brethren about Hillary, and immediately I get, but Trump, it's like, wait a minute, no, excuse me, I know this game. Don't want to deal with this, go answer that, because that's what you want to be on. I'm sorry, I want to hear about the candidate. So when people start deflecting, it just annoys me. So I'll put you on the spot. Immigration,
Sure.
Gary Johnson.
That is one of the issues I disagree with Gary with.
What is his position?
He is, he believes in the free movement of people across borders. He believes in basically getting rid of the barriers to come into this country, to allow for more work visas, and his position is that they don't take our jobs, they take jobs that Americans don't want. I disagree with him because, quite frankly, I think that they do take our jobs. They take the jobs that Americans aren't willing to pay or do for so little pay, and that's kind of where him and I disagree, and why I do affiliate myself with the Republican Party, because of small differences between myself and the Libertarian platform.
But now, Trump is saying he's going to throw all the immigrants out, which is kind of a farce. Our police chief, Tom O'Laughlin, once put it in perspective for me. He said, if we hermetically seal the country, okay, nothing can get in, nothing can get out. It would take 84 years to deport everybody. You got to find them. But if you could find them, it would still take you 84 years to deport everybody.
I think immigration is what built this country. American Indians aside, immigration is what built this country. Legal immigration should be a hallmark of what this country stands for. But illegal immigration is an entirely different entity. And I think that we can do ourselves a great service by affording ourselves of the benefits of a diverse population done legally. not because there are quotas, not because we want to take more, Indian engineers than we want to take Mexican farm workers, but because you have to have your hand on the pulse of what's going on.
Now, I agree with you, because as a country, we're the biggest thieves of talent in the world. You know, this whole idea of limiting how many students come to our universities kills me. We get the brightest, the most affluent coming to our country to
Sure,
learn. And 25, 30% of them stay and help create businesses.
Sure, and I should probably clarify, my immigration stance is that we should have control over who comes in this country
Yes.
legally by getting skilled workers and smart educators, and not people who are going to be a burden on the overall system.
Well, Mike, I've got a couple probably unpopular views, but number one, if I invited you into my home and you start breaking my furniture, I think I have the right to ask you to leave.
Sure.
It's the same thing. If you come into my country and you are a drug dealer, you break the laws. I have no sympathy with you being put on a plane or put in jail.
If I came into your house very politely without being invited and began washing your windows and washing your floor, you'd still throw me out.
Right.
Because it's your house and you didn't invite me.
Exactly.
And that was my second piece, to say, I will never forget that my grandfather came to Milford in '39 with $32.80 in his pocket, and somebody gave him a chance.
Sure.
Came in legally, he worked hard, he made a life for himself and my family, and I'm benefiting because somebody let him in. But I think that's the point. I mean, when I heard Trump say he would ban all Muslims,
That was wrong.
if he said, I would ban people we cannot vet, I don't know that I couldn't support that.
Right. If you had said something where, we're going to not accept people from war-torn countries like Syria and Yemen, I could understand that. But to say, or you can't, even Ukraine, they're still
But again,
fighting
if
a
I
civil
can't
war.
vet you, if I don't think you'll be a positive influence to our society, then I should have the right. But when you start, you remember back in 1960 when they said, you can't have one of those Catholics as president.
Sure.
Everybody forgets that JFK, everybody went at him, and one of the things they used, or not everybody, but the people that went after him said, he's a Catholic. You're going to have the Pope moving into the White House. And you remember how just upset we were, saying, excuse me? Or today when I start hearing, one of the political parties, some of the WikiLeaks, talking about the Christians and how to manipulate them, and it just bothers me. So I guess if I want the right not to be singled out, I don't know how I can turn around and say I'm going to take a broad brush of a whole religion.
Right.
You can't. Ethically, you can't. Just being intellectually honest with yourself, you cannot.
And that's my point. I remember Kennedy, and can't have a Catholic in the White House. And I'm looking and saying, why?
And they shot him, and there hasn't been one since.
Oh, stop. But, second thing, Gary Johnson said some things about legalizing drugs that I never understood.
Well, part of the Libertarian Party is that you are the master of your own body. If you want to, it's a personal choice. If you want to, introduce substances or exclude substances. So, they are all about saying, yeah, if you want to, do recreational activities in your own basement, that's fine. I think we recognize that once you're on the public roads, of course, now you're affecting other individuals, and we wouldn't have that. But you don't eliminate the use simply by making it illegal, as we can see today. With opioid usage through the roof.
How do you deal with the opioids?
Well, first of all, you can't. Marijuana is nothing like an opioid. But
Again, I'm thinking drugs.
sure, I mean,
These kids get on them. We had Sheriff Lou come on and a few people on the show, and they start talking about how Oxy now is selling on the street at $1 a mig. So you want 3 tablets, or your body craves 3 tablets a day, that's 240 migs. 3 times the 81 mig
Sure.
tablets.
it's expensive versus
They
cheap
can't
heroin.
afford to keep that habit up.
And I think that goes to the part that Oxy being legal is regulated, is controlled, and it's hard to get because it is legal and regulated. Where heroin is just mass produced, underground and distributed across the country with no regulation, no oversight. And if it were legal, then you could try to introduce recovery programs, to users and go that route versus criminalizing essentially what could be classified as a disability.
But
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. You got the guy with the little snakes and thou shalt do no harm that you swore an oath to.
Yep,
Heroin? How does that fit in?
it doesn't.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't. I don't know how I feel. I think there's no point in criminalizing narcotic use. That's not the same as legalizing it. I think there's a real good point in criminalizing dealing narcotics. But using, I think everybody's interests, yours, mine, and the addict's interests are best served by decriminalizing it, not legalizing it, so that it ceases to be something that needs to be punished and becomes something that needs to be treated. And that is definitely falls into the category of enlightened self-interest, because my taxes are going to be a whole lot lower if we help this addict overcome his addiction than if we throw him in Walpole at how many tens of thousands of dollars a year that I have to pay for.
Absolutely.
But would it work? If you decriminalize
I don't know. It hasn't been tried yet.
I know what's on
Has
the
criminalizing it worked?
what's on the dockets today doesn't seem to be working. I hadn't thought about decriminalizing it, but not legalizing it.
Yeah, they're all different levels of things you could try. As you know, that the town is looking at an opioid appropriation to fight opioid epidemic, and like you said, we're paying for it either way. Let's try to get these people in recovery programs, and we obviously recognize that the opioids, unlike cannabis, is harmful. The question is, should it be criminal?
Yeah, but when you say harmful, I laugh because alcohol, not harmful?
Exactly. Alcohol could kill you.
Alcohol being legal is more or less more an accident of time than it is.
Cigarettes? When you think about it as a physician, what's the first thing you normally tell people? Stop smoking.
Absolutely.
No matter what illness you're coming in for, if I smell smoke on you, I'm going to tell you for your own health, for a myriad or a plethora of reasons, stop smoking.
Stop smoking, stop drinking, stop eating bacon.
And I don't call the cops.
Blasphemy.
I don't call the cops because he's smoking.
Right.
I don't call the cops if he's an addict either, but
No,
some do. There are those who...
I used to like him. Don't take my bacon. Blasphemy. Don't mess with my bacon.
It's a high fat, high in cholesterol.
Oh, it's all bad.
It's
But you
very-
got to have a vice.
But, well,
You have a right to decide.
that should be your own choice whether or not you decide.
No, it's
that
my
that
wife's
vice-
choice. She decided I can't have it.
Whether or not you
Smart
choose to
woman.
have that vice or not. So,
So now we look the economy. I feel comfortable. I don't know Gary Johnson. I don't know what he did in New Mexico to the degree that I feel very comfortable with William Weld. Here was somebody who really did, in my mind, a good job as governor.
well, and Gary did a very similar job in New Mexico. He vetoed tons and tons of bills that simply spent too much like Well did in Massachusetts. So I don't think anyone can argue against his economic achievement, at least in New Mexico.
I don't know, that's what I'm asking.
You know, I said earlier I was a libertarian with a small L until very recently. I know more about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton than I do about Gary Johnson. I know what label he carries. I know that that's a philosophy I espouse. I know as much about him as I can find out at this point, that he is legitimately honest and has the best interest of the American people at heart. But to tell you what he's done as governor, I can't. Maybe you can.
Well, basically, you know, libertarians, they try to lower taxes, they try to reduce regulation, and the whole idea is if you reduce the cost to do business, you reduce the barrier to entry to do business, not only do you create jobs, you know, employers hire more people, but more employees become business owners because now there's not such a large barrier to go into the business of whatever it is that you do.
Well, we're feeling it now. I'm spending more and more money. You know, we've got a 20-person company that we're building. The amount of regulations that we're having to learn about is huge.
I could tell you about regulation.
No. Yes,
But-
the FDA is not the most liberal group.
FDA, CMS, they're out of control. They're wildly out of control.
Yeah, healthcare is by far the worst because there's not a single regulation out there that they disapprove of. You know, it's always, whenever they find any problem, it's, well, we need to add more regulation to prevent this problem versus trying to fix the underlying problem.
Many, many decades ago, when we were working with people down on 2nd and C Street, the FDA labs, we would ask a question is, why does it take so long? You know? And, you know, the answer was always, well, because we want the safest drug supply in the world. And then one researcher once said to me, nobody's ever gotten fired for not letting a bad drug on the market. And it just struck me like, oh my God. Yet how many people are dying while you hold up clinical trials?
Yeah, it's a real problem.
And, you know, I don't deal in clinical trials. I deal in treating people day to day. They just passed a law creating something called MassPat, where every time I prescribe a benzodiazepine, I'm pretty stingy with these drugs.
As you should be.
As I should be. Or a narcotic, or a narcotic-like drug, or drugs that aren't narcotics but have been reclassified as narcotics because they didn't have any others to classify. I have to go online, put in the patient's name, date of birth, and town they live in, zip code they live in, to see if they've gotten that drug from somebody else. Every time I prescribe it. And I can't prescribe more than a week at a time. Or in some cases, a month at a time.
See,
so every month I have to go back in and
check.
look this patient up. I mean, I don't have that many patients, but it's enough to chew a good couple hours out of my week.
But see, I guess I lean towards, there are certain physicians, you know, like every occupation, you're going to have the 1% that just are not doing the right thing. And you hear about these physicians down south prescribing 1,000 oxy pills at a whack. To me, they ought to be hung. Not hung, but, you know, they ought to be prosecuted.
Ask the pharmacist, they know.
That's my point. We have the technology that you could go in and say, you can write all the scripts you want. It's the CVS Caremarts, it's the Rite Aids that are dispensing them. And they're keeping track of every tablet they have.
You know, there was, before it became a regulation and it had to go through a server somewhere in Boston, we knew, you can tell when somebody comes in that they're looking for drugs, and you pick up the phone and you call the pharmacist at CVS and you say, tell me about so-and-so. Or you call the ER and say, is this person on your list? Because they have a list. And you knew. It wasn't like we weren't taking care of it. But because they couldn't put it in a box and put a frame around it and say, this is what we're doing, please vote for us again, it wasn't any good. A study came out 2 weeks ago now that the average physician spends 50% of his or her time doing paperwork
admin.
and staring at a computer screen, including much of the time they're in the room with the patient.
Well, see, but when you look at the birth of Tri-County, Uncle Phil, the only reason that comes together is economics and the passion physicians have for being with patients. Because somebody coming out of med school, well, first of all, they're at an age where they're probably ready to retire by the time they do all their studies and subspecialties and all, but okay, now they roll into the Medicare. I mean, all the burden of admin work. And they're sitting there saying, wait a minute. It's not like the old days where physicians, no matter what, you had an MD, guaranteed great salary. Today, these people work way too hard for not enough money. So they have to have a passion to be with patients. And you're taking it away so that you're giving them 13.2 minutes with each patient? I mean, I don't get it. There's got to be a better way.
Well, I mean, we got to this by the government keeps adding more and more requirements. Obamacare is just, in my opinion, a huge disaster where it promised lower rates, and what it did was it completely neglected why costs are high to begin with, which is patient care. And they went after insurance companies thinking, oh, we'll get economies of scale by simply requiring everyone to have insurance, which it totally backfired. And a lot of people see that.
But the minute Obama told my daughter, you can keep your plan, I said, this will never work. I would have had more respect if he got up and said, I am going to overtax all of you young people, because someday you're going to get old. And you think of our kids, 20, 25, 30 years old. They don't use much health care.
But then he loses the 20 or the 30 vote.
Yeah, well, there was the problem. Then he couldn't get it through. Because what he should be saying, honestly, is, well, for so many years, you're going to overpay. Because when you get to be my age, you get to be an old man, you can't pay enough with everything. You look at my mother, 92 years old. The myriad of pills that we put in the little cups.
Sure.
She could never afford to pay for all those. So who's paying for it? It should be my daughter, her granddaughter, paying ahead.
She used to be able to pay for all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're at a point now where seeing me is the cheapest part of a patient's encounter. I write scripts, and they go spend a whole lot more on medications
Yes. I see
than
what you're
they
saying.
or their insurance pays on paying me. And how did that happen? I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but I have a theory. And that is that back in the late 80s, I think they passed the generic drug laws, which on the one hand allowed other companies that hadn't done the research to assume this formula and make this drug at a certain length of time after that drug's been out. Well, what does that do for the company that did the research? They've got to make the same amount of money. That's
Yes.
their mandate. But now instead of having 15 years to do
They
it,
got 7.5
they got
years.
3 years.
Yeah.
And so they have to quadruple the cost of the drug to front load all their income from that drug development. And you have a hard time arguing against the benefit of drug development.
Sure.
The medications we use today are incredibly more effective than the medications we used when I was young.
Well, and you also have orphan drugs coming in. I mean, when you look at liposome storage disorder drugs, the Genzyme, $165,000 per year per person. The Hep C drug, I feel better about. That's 80 grand and I'm cured. You know? You start looking at treatments for Fabry's, Gaucher's, Pompe's, that's $165,000 every year for the rest of your life. Now, the other medical ethics, how do you tell somebody, nah, we can't, for what I'm paying to keep you, wealthy old man, alive, I could put that money into the inner city or to the rural areas of this country and help 100 kids. On paper, that sounds good, except if I'm the old man that I want to live.
Right.
So, you know, again, I don't know how to answer the question of, you know, do you put in place restrictions on how much medicine can cost?
Well, I feel like, I mean, whenever the government has tried to do good intentions by creating price controls, you just create shortage. You know, you look at Venezuela, they can't keep the shelves stocked because, I mean, you can't, when you cap the price of eggs to $1 and they cost $1.20, people aren't going to produce them. You know what I mean? So I think government creating price controls is very dangerous. And I think all libertarians would agree with that. And then as far as, you know, what you choose to take should be a personal choice. You know, it shouldn't, I mean, obviously you would consult with a physician, but at the end of the day, you should have the master decision of what you take or what you don't take as far as medication.
But should you pay for that, or should I? If you choose to smoke, you can do all the studies, and you're going to cost society a lot more money in medical treatment than if you don't. So should I be forced to bear that?
Well, what happens when you get government involved is you say, okay, let's tax cigarettes. I mean, how much of the cost of a carton of cigarettes is tax?
Most of it at this point.
And how much of that money goes to medical research?
Well, remember it was supposed to?
Not much, yeah.
Remember the cigarette tax that was going to
Right.
have all this money till they started, well, we can use a little bit of that for our programs.
And I personally have no problem taxing vices to, you know, with the intent of targeting programs like that. But, I mean, every tax is eventually just general funds, unfortunately. It's just
It's only a matter of time.
only a matter of
No,
time.
you know it on the FinCom.
Yeah,
So much of the stuff comes in, it just falls to free cash.
sure.
And then we get to allocate it where we think is best. I mean, you know, some of us, we've had that argument, give it back.
Absolutely.
You
As
took too
as you
much.
can. Yeah.
You took too much, you know. But now you talk about taxes. It was interesting at the second debate where they said Donald Trump paid no taxes for a number of years.
Well, I mean, when you look at the tax code, and it's, I don't know how many thousand, I think it's 75,000
Yes,
pages.
War and Peace is light reading.
It is ridiculous. And I think a lot of Republicans have campaigned on the whole idea that your individual tax rate, you should be able to, the law to calculate that should fit in 3 pages or less. You know, it really shouldn't be that complicated. You made so much, you know, you paid so much in tax throughout the year, you have a handful of deductions, and that's it. But when they complicate the tax code to such an extent, what happens is, you know, companies like yours, where 20 employees, I mean, they have accounting departments of 1,000
Yes.
accountants trying to find every loophole and deduction there is. You certainly can't afford that, you know, your company, and so you end up paying a higher tax rate than a huge conglomerate like GE, and I think that's very wrong. We need to simplify the tax code.
See, I had a problem when Donald Trump said, I didn't pay taxes, I'm smart.
Well, I mean, I don't.
If he had said, Hillary, the reason I didn't pay taxes is you and the people like you have set up these loopholes. Because candidly, if they came to you and said, your tax guy said, Arthur, here's a legal $1,000 deduction, would you really say, no, I should be paying my
course
fair
not.
share? I mean, honestly, is it
Donald
legal?
Trump never has, in this entire campaign, has ever said the best thing he should have said.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, if he broke the law tax-wise, he should go to jail.
Right, but he didn't.
But he didn't. So we should look and say what's fair and
I
right.
would challenge anyone who has a problem with him taking those deductions. I would challenge that person to not take their own personal deductions.
That's my point.
When they file their own
Right.
taxes. You would never pay more
Then you have to.
what you owe. I mean, the government, through our filing system, tells you you owe so much. They said he didn't owe any for that 1 year. We don't know what the rest of the 20
But it
years
doesn't
are like.
matter. I mean,
But
the
it's
point.
not, he's not the one who created the tax code
Right.
that gave him such a beneficial tax rate.
You know, and it's so easy. Years ago, when Forbes ran, he said, "Oh, I'll just make a flat tax, 17%." And then they said, "But wait a minute. If you made a real flat tax, people over $100,000 would be getting a huge tax benefit." You know,
Well, but would they? I mean, when you have Donald Trump not paying anything, he would at least pay. So Rand Paul had a great, 14.5 flat tax with a, a poverty deduction. So
but see, that's the point.
yeah,
Can you really have a flat tax? Are you going to go to the 20% of the people living on welfare and government and say you got to pay more?
I think any
Those people
reasonable
would
candidate.
they'd be under the,
Right. So it's not a real
Under the-
flat tax.
well, it's a flat tax beyond a poverty level.
Right.
Yes.
You know,
And
so-
beyond, how about Social Security people?
Everybody on Social Security makes a different amount, but I suspect they would fall below
See, and
that level
that's
as well.
That's where the minute you say we're going to have a flat tax, then you come to reality.
Sure. I mean, it's a flat tax with an asterisk. If you make less than 20. Or
But I'm
whatever
okay
the
with
poverty
saying we're
level
going to
is.
simplify it. You know, the whole
Yeah.
idea of the alternate minimum tax, you're going to pay at least X. End of story. You know, but I still have a hard time when, I read this guy made $200 million last year and he only paid $15 million in taxes. He didn't pay his fair share. I don't know many of my friends who paid $15 million in taxes. I know I didn't.
The top 5% of the country paid 60% of the tax.
Of the total
collection.
tax.
Yeah. So what is a fair share?
That-
Is it, I've challenged liberal friends of mine and they refuse to answer me. What is a fair share? Because in the back of my mind, I know what percent I paid.
Right.
And I know they're going to guess lower than what I paid.
Well, but Arthur, I think the definition of what's a fair share is $1 more than I make.
Right.
You know what I mean? Every time I hear, it's like, well, what do you think's a fair? Well, anybody making more than 400,000.
Yep.
Why? Because I make 320.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
You know, I mean, the Obama thing where I'm only going to tax people above you. The rich will pay. Define rich.
Makes more than you do. I want to know what a fair share is. What percentage is a
And
fair
see,
share?
I don't know. Because, I sit there and say, well, the people who are poor, you can't tax them anymore. The
But
people
look at where most tax money comes from. It's not from income tax, it's from sales taxes.
Yeah.
Because if I sell you something, I pay income tax on what I sold you, and you pay sales tax on what you bought. So that, what does it come out to? Like 60 cents on the dollar is what we pay in taxes when all is said and done.
But then people will argue that's not fair to the poor people because they're paying the same amount of tax on gasoline as you do, and they need gas.
Maybe it isn't.
Well, Gary Johnson had a great proposal where he does support a consumption tax, but he would add it to what he calls a prebate. So
A what?
A prebate. It would be a certain amount of tax dollars paid to you to offset what a person at the poverty level would pay in taxes if they consumed
Yeah, but I remember when Obama spent $1 trillion, he was going to give back tax rebate to stimulate the economy. And I laughed because I said, now wait a minute, there's 5 people in my house. My darling bride, myself, my 2 daughters. None of us qualified for a rebate. My mother, who hadn't paid, at 90 or 80 some years old, hadn't paid any taxes in a decade, she qualified.
Sure.
She was the only, so help me understand how this was a rebate. She didn't put anything in.
It was a rebate to the people who voted for him.
I mean, that's one of the major flaws in our tax system is that you can actually get more of a rebate than you put in. And then that's just,
We tried so hard, our people who rule us, govern us, tried so hard to find enough loopholes to counteract what they felt was a excessive impact on people who were their cronies, that we had this incredibly complex superstructure of tax laws that nobody can understand unless you can afford.
And that's how, in my mind,
to
that
hire
Donald
somebody.
Trump gets away with for 1 year, 5 years, whatever number of years, using loopholes to not pay tax.
Well,
Sure.
not shame on him, shame on the people who wrote the law.
But that's shame on us for letting those laws stand.
well, when you exclude the Libertarian candidate from the debates, you don't hear all the good proposals. You hear bickering between two awful candidates, and you don't hear any policy debate.
So how are you going to answer the question when I say if I vote for Libertarian or Green or Independent or them? If I don't vote for the big two, I'm throwing away my vote.
I was hoping you'd ask that. You go to a website called Balanced Rebellion, one word, .com, and if you consider yourself by default, you'd have to vote for Trump. They'll match you with somebody in Massachusetts who by default would have to vote for Clinton. And you both pledge to anonymously, you both pledge to each other that you won't vote for that person. You'll vote for a third-party candidate. So you really haven't thrown your vote away because you're not voting for Trump is balanced by somebody else who's not voting for Clinton, and you can vote for whoever you think is the best candidate. BalancedRebellion.com. Go there.
That's a great website, but I would also add that the worst kind of throwing away your vote
It's not showing up.
is voting for someone you do not support, that you do not care about. I always use the hashtag #VoteNoEvil because I will not vote for evil A or
Well,
evil B.
You know, we've talked about it where I said I cannot tolerate. You suck, but I suck less, so you should vote for me.
Do you know what happens if nobody gets 270 votes?
House of Reps.
And who do they vote for in the House of Reps? Who are they allowed to vote for?
Anybody.
No.
Oh, the three.
Top
Top
three.
three.
Top three.
Any one of
And
the
how do
top
they
three.
vote? One state, one vote.
Vote, right. So they get anybody of the three.
Of the three,
Of the
who would
three.
be Gary Johnson, what's his name, and her.
So the one pathway to the presidency for Gary Johnson is that he pulls a miracle and wins the state, any state, doesn't matter.
Right.
And neither candidate
And
gets
they all hit
270.
260.
265,
Yeah,
exactly. And there's a scenario where he wins New Mexico and Trump wins the majority of the swing states, and that happens.
Well, this has been interesting. We've come down to the end of our hour. As I've always said, I'll never ask any of my 6 loyal viewers to vote for a specific candidate, but I will beg you to vote. Learn about the 3 or 4 candidates. Figure out which one best represents what you believe in. But please, in November, show up and vote. Because I'll disagree a little bit with Mike. The worst thing in my mind is not voting at all. So, as always, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thank you for watching.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just